Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, returning guest. This will be our 13th show episode. It's unbelievable how many shows we've done on a variety of different subjects. But we're going to talk about this movie everybody's talking about, Sound of Freedom. And I actually went and watched it just out of curiosity, just because of all the buzz it's created in the stories. And it is an important topic about human trafficking. And there's a lot of interesting backstory. And I was listening to John today. He's done some shows, this Sound of Freedom and the externalization of the hierarchy, but all these connections between some of these characters that maybe the public doesn't know as much. So I'm delighted to have him back. So John, welcome back to the show.
It's an honor to be back, William, as always. And yeah, I mean, I myself had researched Operation Underground Railroad many years ago when I came up with their connections to Glenn Beck. And actually, I think one of the first podcasts I ever was on, either the first or second time I was on Greg Carwood's The Higher Side Chats, I discussed Operation Underground Railroad on with Greg, because I came across, Tim Ballard's connections to Glenn Beck, who's a member of the CMP, who's also was raised Catholic, but later converted into Mormonism. Is a big news broadcaster on the conservative side, and I always found that to be an interesting connection. So I knew of Tim Ballard and knew of Operation Underground Railroad, and had been tracking Sound of Freedom. And then when it finally blew up, I was like, oh, okay, well, I've been following this for a while, so at least I have some knowledge of it previously beforehand. I guess one thing I'd like to mention is you've covered the quote unquote satanic panic through your whole entire body of work, exposing how it was not that there was, institutionalized pedophilia and human trafficking and occultism for many, many years, longer than I have. And so
you've done the same work. You've done the whole Finders thing too, right? So
well, yes. So before anybody points fingers at us and say, how dare you guys call to attention some information that's very sketchy with Operation Underground Railroad and Tim Ballard and Jim Caviezel, they're saving the kids. I'm going to say, look, like, our body of research and work stands for itself. And yes, we might be, discussing our issues with Operation Underground Railroad and with Tim Ballard and Caviezel, but it doesn't take away the true reality of human trafficking or child trafficking or institutionalized pedophilia or elite pedophilia or anything like that. But I still would recommend that, if you want to go see the movie, fine. I saw it myself just so I can, speak upon it and everything. But we shouldn't be supporting Operation Underground Railroad with all the various connections that we've seen with it, with Carlos Slim and the Clinton Foundation and everything. So we should have to be able to take out the emotionality, because they want you emotional about this stuff. Not that you shouldn't care, that you shouldn't be emotional, but they want to ramp that up so that I've heard, people discussing, hey, there's issues with this. Pay attention to those issues. Immediately it becomes weaponized, and well, what do you support pedophilia? You're a groomer, and you start getting those type of allegations, William, and stuff like that. And it's sad to see, people like myself. Hopefully this doesn't happen to you through talking about this too as well. Some people get very emotional, upset about it, but they make those allegations, and we've spent a lot of our research careers exposing this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't feel like just criticizing who these people are and who they're connected to. Like, just like you said, it doesn't take away from the fact that human trafficking is a huge issue. It's happening at the border right now. And a lot of just the open borders really is a lot of human trafficking issues. A lot of these guys are going into slave labor. The government right now is pro human trafficking. So that's really what's happening. You're just going to have a whole new set of serfs and slaves, like 7 million people wandering around the U.S. It's totally insane. But and there's like pictures in Congress just last week. One of the congresspersons showed this little girl who a guy, they weren't related. He was definitely like a pedophile with a 7-8-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And so these are real stories. Caviezel, interesting guy. Ballard, like you said, has been around for a while. But maybe you can we know the Clinton Foundation's dirty as all get out. And people may not know Carlos Slim's background, but he made his money in very interesting ways. And I don't know if you know this, but like when he was in Mexico, he made a lot of his money on cell towers. And what he would do is he would literally just show up at your house and say, we're putting a cell tower here. And and we'll give you some property over there. And if they complained, like, horrible things happened to him. Like, people got run off the road. They got threatened. Like, he was just a real like robber baron mentality. So just the fact that they're with this guy is incredible. There's pictures of them together too with Carlos Slim. He's probably character washing himself. And there's stories about him blowing like deaths, like all kinds of really heavy duty
And
stuff.
I've talked about it in my streams. I don't know if you've came across this information too, of allegations of the Slim family and drug trafficking in Mexico. I don't know how, they're very, very difficult to substantiate such a things, but I did, come across journalists who were discussing those possible connections and implications. And so I don't know, if more can be discovered about that or not, but there were allegations of that occurring too as well.
My understanding is that Mexico is kind of a narco state, that the narco dollars go all the way up through the politicians. Even what was the guy's name who was the big, tall Mexican guy? Like all these guys have there's associates who handle that. They don't do it, but they know that there's stopping points on the drug routes, and everybody makes, dips their beak and keeps their mouth shut. And a lot of those guys don't have a choice. Like, we're going to bring stuff up here, and you can either, what do they call it there? Plomo or plata, you take the silver or the lead, right?
Yeah.
So it's endemic in Mexico, especially at the higher levels. So Vicente Fox, that's what the guy's name was. I'm trying to remember. But maybe people like this movie in Caviezel, these guys have an interesting Ballard. And we talked kind of in this pre-show that Ballard himself saw, like the character's name in the movie is Tim Ballard. Like, it is Caviezel is playing Tim Ballard. But you said like he's a Mormon, he's got 9 kids. They have this whole sequences in the movie of his home life. But it's almost like there's a subtext of promoting Mormonism, right?
Yes, very much so. So I came across the excellent investigative research of Lynn Packer, who had a YouTube channel who done at least 30 plus videos exposing Tim Ballard and Operation Underground Railroad for many years. And then, I definitely recommend that anybody listening go look at his YouTube channel, go look at his research. And Packer, he came across quotes of one of the people. His name was M. Russell Ballard, no relation to Tim Ballard, supposedly. He's part of very high up echelon of the Mormon church known as the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He's also directly related to Hiram Smith, who is Joseph Smith's brother. Of course, within Mormonism, it's kind of like a Christianized way of practicing Freemasonry, right? So it's very interesting that Joseph Smith's brother's name was Hiram, and Hiram or Biff within Freemasonry lore. And so this guy's in when it comes to the Mormon church, and the Mormon church is very wealthy. There's a lot of allegations of human trafficking within the Mormon church too, as well, and elite pedophilia within the Mormon church that Tim Ballard never discusses. Okay. And, you have connections between the Bronfman family and Nexium and Mormonism down there in Mexico, right? Which Recluse has talked a lot about from the Farm podcast as well, and it's had discussions with various people about that. And so, you have institutionalized pedophilia within the Mormon church and human trafficking within the Mormon church that Tim Ballard does not touch. But M. Russell Ballard, to make your point as to what you're talking about, he discussed, and you have direct quotes for him, saying that Operation Underground Railroad, their main job isn't to save the children, isn't to stop human trafficking or child trafficking. Their main job as an organization, and Tim Ballard's main job, is to proselytize for the false Mormon religion. Okay, he said that, and he said that Tim Ballard is ordained by God to do so for the Mormon church. We also have the speculation again with, Len Packer mentions that is the Mormon church directly funding Operation Underground Railroad, or they are doing it through Glenn Beck, who's funding the Operation Underground Railroad, or is the Mormon church directly funding it? And also, Packer brings up the excellent point too as well. Where are the kids that have been rescued? Like, what? Like, where? Like, they claim they have various children they claim to have been rescued, right? But like, where are they? There's no hard evidence that the Operation Underground Railroad has saved any children. And it gets kind of murky in that regard, because I'd have to go back and find the girl. I'm really bad with names sometimes. In the movie that they portrayed in the movie Sound of Freedom, even Operation Underground Railroad came out and said that the events that they portrayed in the film, now Tim Ballard supposedly walked away from Operation Underground Railroad 2. He claimed that he walked away before the film's released. We don't know if he was forced out. It's kind of murky on that too, William, as far as that story is concerned. Okay, he's also left the Nazarene Fund too, as well, as a director for the Nazarene Fund, which is run by Glenn Beck, right, to supposedly help Christians in Afghanistan. Okay. And so, but anyway, we don't know if that girl, if the events that were told in Sound of Freedom with, her rescue and Tim Ballard being involved down there in Latin America, is that true? Because Operation Underground Railroad, through their Instagram, said the portrayal of Tim Ballard in the Sound of Freedom is theatrical. It's not based on actual events that happen in real life.
Wow.
So they're going around and saying, Tim Ballard's like, this movie's based on my life. It's almost autobiographical. Okay. Wow. But in reality, it's not.
Wow. Yeah. The girl's name was Rocio or something like that. There was a boy and a girl. This is like full spoiler. Sorry if people haven't seen the movie, but it basically traces Caviezel, Ballard following to a brother and a sister. And so he finds the brother, then he has to start the sister, and they have they set up a fake Epstein pedo island off the coast of Colombia. And that's a means to get these trafficked kids to the island. So then they rescue those kids, but this girl, Rocio or whatever her name, isn't there. So then they have to go into the deep jungle of Colombia to go rescue her, and all's well then.
And it's right here. It says, Tim went to a Colombian jungle by himself to rescue a little girl. Now, this is from Operation Underground Railroad's rescue, their official Instagram, okay? They said, false. In the film, Tim poses as a doctor and goes into the jungle somewhere in Colombia to find the little boy's sister shortly after Operation Triple Take. This did not happen. However, supposedly, allegedly, in real life, Tim did lead a group of Operation Underground Railroad operators posing as doctors into a jungle on the border of Haiti and Dominican Republic a few years after Operation Triple Take in search for Gardy. No one was rescued, but the operation did advance to search for Gardy.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's dramatized. It almost looks like a kind of a higher end B movie. It obviously wasn't some major studio. It's Angel Studios or something.
Which was found by the Harmons, which are Mormons.
Okay, and then it was The Chosen 2, right?
Yes, that is true.
Did The Chosen. And Joseph
Dallas
Smith,
Jenkins.
Yeah, Joseph Smith is a known Mason. Like there's actual research from Mormons themselves showing the Masonic temples that Joseph Smith went into.
Yeah.
And it's interspersed in through their religion and their symbolism and all of their rituals. A lot of it's Masonic. So
it's a whole nother gospel. He took down the information that was dictated to him through the angel Moroni, which they get Angel Studios from. Angel Studios is named after the angel Moroni.
Wow.
And of course, in the Bible, it says, if there's another gospel, given, especially by other men or angels, let them be accursed. Okay. And so, we're told to warn about this, and it says literally another gospel or testament of Jesus Christ, which is the Book of Mormon. Okay. Right. So as Christians, we know it's a false gospel just based off of that alone. Okay. And so
it's a really interesting book. Like it's so brazen, like it's a restored gospel that was kept by gold plates by people who came out of ancient Israel on boats to the New World, started a civilization. And then the civilization wiped itself out.
Yep.
And there was one guy remaining. And then he put the plates in. And then to be translated by the new prophet, Joseph Smith. It's amazing. But there's also contradictions. These are really interesting things for Mormons to figure out. If you want to talk about a fake gospel, there's contradictions between the receipt of the Book of Mormon and the so-called gold plates that he supposedly translated, because he was also engaging with kind of country rural magic using a shoe stone and a hat and a translator, much like Dee and Kelly and Crowley and Newberg. So he had this kid, Sidney Rigdon, who, he moved through a lot of people too, Joseph Smith. Once he was done with them, he just kind of kept going. But he and Sidney Rigdon was the dictator, and Joseph Smith has this shoe stone.
Yep.
He shoved it in a hat, put his head in the hat, and that shoe stone is on display in the Mormon Museum in Salt Lake City. So like this guy's clearly practicing, and we can get into all the magical.
Clearly practicing magic, which is
Yeah,
clearly forbidden by God in the
no
Bible.
question.
You know, and then nobody can actually see any of the plates or anything to verify any of it. It's all based off of Joseph Smith's testimony, right?
Right.
And so,
One of
I
the
mean,
tricks that he did was you can hold the plates, and he gave them a box they couldn't look into.
yep,
So he gave them something very heavy. This is all written record. Gave him something heavy, and he said, "Now you've seen the plates. You just touched a
Yep.
heavy object.
yep.
We're good to go." So that was it. So
I mean, it is completely different.
and he was a dowser too. He's a known dowser. So he was a known dowser trying to find water with this dowsing. He was just all over the place with all kinds of stuff, like in the backwoods of the burnt over ground of New York, upstate, in the poor as heck, super poor, and really imaginative. Like his imagination was for like L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah. So.
But I mean, you know, as you know, Mormonism is another religion. And Operation Underground Railroad definitely was being pushed you know, as a way of pushing Mormonism. And Russell Ballard said that himself directly. That's what it was main goal. And we know that also that there were 2 books that Tim Ballard wrote, William. One you can look it up. It's called, what is it? What's the name of them? Let's look up Timothy Ballard
Operation Toussaint.
Book on America.
It's happening right here.
It's
the Covenant, America's
the Covenant, yes,
immutable connection to ancient Israel.
So there was 2 Covenant books. There was one directly written to Mormons, okay, and then there was one where M. Russell Ballard told him to sanitize for conservatives and for Christians the Covenant book, and that's the one you're looking at right now, is the sanitized version for conservatives and Christians that removes, supposedly, allegedly, even though I think it left in a lot of it, Mormon theology. Okay, and so again, Tim Ballard is a proselytizing Mormon. When you hear him in interviews, you couldn't, if you know, unless you know you're really in your Bible and you're really in the Word, you would think he's a Christian, but he's not. I mean, you know, there's also conflicting story. This was brought out by the Rantcast. He brought it up on Twitter, and he actually caught Tim Ballard in a lie. He said that when he told his wife that he was quitting Homeland Security and going to found Operation Underground Railroad, he's got 2 separate stories, William. One is he told her in person, and the other is he told her over the phone. So which one is it?
Interesting.
And so he lied about that. And in that discussion, she goes, well, I feel like God won't accept me into heaven, and I'll go to hell if I don't allow you to do this, Tim, which makes it a works-based gospel. And so we know the true gospel is being saved by God's grace through our faith, you know, which Mormonism is a works-based gospel. So even in that, Timothy Ballard's wife even mentions that too as well. So they have this whole mythos that he's ordained by God to do Operation Underground Railroad. And and it plays in with Mormon proselytizing through the Mormon church and to drive people into Mormonism. And then, you know, you have the allegations of Tim Ballard being a Knight of Malta. And I can't really completely confirm that picture that it's him. However, there is the second guy's name in that picture.
Look at Cavaziel is definitely a Knight of Malta.
Oh, very much so, yeah.
That's all his stuff right there. But let me see, Ballard. This is Ballard with the Masonic tie. I thought I had something where he was a Knight of Malta too.
There's a picture of him, and the guy that they post with him was a guy that also worked on the movie too as well. That worked with Operation Underground Railroad. That they have with Timothy Ballard being a Knight of Malta, which makes me think that maybe it really is him, because the other guy is listed too as well. The odds of them both being listed and both having their exact names is because they're not common names. You know, it's not like John Smith and William, you know, like Martin or something like that, you know. And so you end up wondering, is it really them? It probably is. I haven't 100% confirmed that, but it probably is. And we also have the interview, since you saw a picture of Carlos Slim up there. Yeah, you have the interview of where Tim Ballard said that Carlos Slim funded the Sound of Freedom, and we know that his son Patrick Slim has a movie credit given to him at the end of Sound of Freedom
Oh,
for
wow.
producer of the movie.
Wow. Interesting. I didn't know that. Slim is here. Here he is with Robert or Hunter Biden. So he's around and he's cozying up. This is Lindy Rothschild. She was in the whole Pizzagate thing
Yep.
with what is it? Oh, what was that group? Forgot. It was Alefantis' boyfriend is heavily involved.
David Brock.
Thank you, David Brock. So she's a financer too. She's really a remarkable person. She's not. It's not her maiden name. She married way up.
Yeah, very much so.
Pseudo royalty. Yeah.
With
Actually, interesting. Just to say something interesting, Slim and her both made their money in cell phones. She was a really sharp lawyer and saw that cell phones were going to be huge and got into some contracts. Like she was a corporate lawyer and she said, "Hey, I should have owned some of these contracts," and it really paid off to her in the like tens of millions of dollars.
Well, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, no. So that's probably maybe why these two are, cohorts or pals. And that's this guy super sketchy. This other guy, Frank Giustra, right?
So you have Slim donating lots of money to the Clinton Foundation, becoming a primary vested interest in the New York Slimes, media corporation as well too. And so, I mean, Slim definitely is not our guy, but he's yoked heavily up with, funding the Sound of Freedom, funding Operation Underground Railroad, his son working this is years, this is Sound of Freedom has been years in the making as a movie, William, so this has been years of this, at least 6 years, 5 or 6 years as the Slim family has been yoked up with Ballard, with Operation Underground Railroad. And again, this should be something that should raise a red flag to anybody listening. Okay. And there's more connections than just, that you have, the connections of the pushing of the National Human Trafficking Hotline, right, which is run by Polaris, and Polaris uses Palantir technology by Peter Thiel to categorize all the calls that they get into the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And then you have also connections between the National Human Trafficking Hotline and the International Center for Missing Exploited Children, which was founded in part with Hillary Clinton. So you have the Clinton Foundation connections to Polaris and the National Human Trafficking Hotline as well too. So if they're really fighting human trafficking, why would they send you to the wolves?
Right. They get involved in all that stuff so they can traffic themselves, or it's a cover or something. Like that whole story with Haiti and all that stuff and Silsby, that's all been verified.
There it is, the Templar Times. Paul Hutchinson was the guy I was thinking at. So you have Paul Hutchinson, which is also involved with Operation Underground Railroad and the Sound of Freedom, and you have Timothy Ballard. Now, I don't know if Timothy Ballard's middle name is Blaine. I tried to substantiate that. I could not find that. But again, with Paul Hutchinson and Timothy Ballard both being listed and both being involved with Sound of Freedom and Operation Underground Railroad, I'm pretty sure they got indicted into the Night of Malta at the same time.
Yeah, probably. And that's a super connected group to be into the Knights. Who else did the Black conservatives the Night of Malta? I forgot what his name is now. The military guy.
There's numerous Knights of Malta within the Council for National Policy. G. Peter Grace. There's Patrick J. Buchanan. General William Boykin. There are a lot of Knights of Malta, both within the real Knights of Malta organization and the Priory down there in Florida, which actually sued the Knights of Malta sued them, should I say, and the Priory in Florida won and proved that they were an offshoot of the Knights of Malta.
Wow.
So they kind of LARP as Knights of Malta. You can look up, they're called the Florida Priory of Knights of Malta, but they are official Knights of Malta because Knights of Malta sued them and lost in court.
Wow. Priory.
Should be the Order of St. John, Florida Priory.
There's a lot. I guess there's a lot of different sovereign orders. Grand Priory of England, the Via del Priorato di Malta.
Okay, just type in Order of Saint. Go to osjflorida.org.
Oh, there it is. America's Priory. Let's go. Knights Hospitaller. It's amazing to think that all this stuff is still around.
Yes, very much so.
It's still an underground. This is a picture of Joseph Smith's magical parchments. This is like right out of the Seal of Solomon type stuff. Like and he died with like he had the seal of Jupiter on the back of one of his like medallions or something. Joseph Smith died saying Masonic language. Have somebody have sympathy for the widow's son or something like that. Some kind of thing like that.
Which he was trying to say in prison to be able to protect himself.
Yeah. He was like a Masonic, call sign to fellow brothers. Like, come and help me. And there's Caviezel watching.
Yeah, being pushed by Trump, right?
Yeah,
so you have Jim Caviezel, who is a Catholic, but he is a very blasphemic Catholic that says that Mary is co-redemptrix with Jesus, that you have to go through Mary to be able to be redeemed, where Jesus is the only mediator and the only savior and the only way to God the Father. But Caviezel was putting that that Trump is the new Moses. Let our children go.
Right. It's incredible.
Which, I mean, we know that Trump's connections, Trump's connections to Epstein, and Katie Johnson and everything like that. It's like Trump's hands are not clean at all, period, and then to say that Trump's the new Moses and he's going to save the children and lead them to the promised land, that's just insane. It's insanity.
Crazy. That's why Caviezel and Gibson are probably buddies, is they're both kind of like esoteric Catholics or something weird like
Very
that.
much so, yeah. It was also pushed by Mark Wahlberg too as well. Right. Mark Wahlberg was pushing Sound of Freedom too, and seems to be a huge Catholic esoteric nexus that's pushing Sound of Freedom, which, by the way, they claim that Passion of the Christ 2 is coming out next year, supposedly, allegedly.
Wow.
William.
Wow. It'll be interesting, I'm sure. It's amazing.
These
are amazing times, yeah.
Now, Angel Studios, yes, very much so. Now, you might find this interesting. They were bailed out by the Giga Fund, and Giga Fund, pull it up if you can, real quick. Because we're always interested in Peter Thiel, right? He seems to always have his hand in everything, right? So Angel Studios got a major round of backing and finance just in the opportune time. The Chosen was popular, but they could always use extra money to expand, which later came to finance The Sound of Freedom, which Angel Studios recently only distributed the film and picked it up the past few months. Well, that inflush of cash that allowed that to happen was through the Giga Fund, and Giga Fund is directly tied in with Peter Thiel and Thiel Capital and Founders Fund. And I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, Thiel, again, Polaris is using to categorize the children for the National Center of Missing Exploited Children and National Human Trafficking Hotline, using Palantir technology for that. And then you have Thiel pretty much bankrolling and funding the distribution of Sound of Freedom through Giga Fund and through throwing millions upon tens of millions of dollars into Angel Studios.
Wow, that's incredible. I had no idea. All these guys, wow. That's remarkable. The budget wasn't really that much, $15 million budget. It wasn't 10 times that, right? Yeah.
And so with Giga Fund, you have, who was the founder of it? Luke Nazak, who was, was involved with PayPal with Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, and launched Founders Fund with Peter Thiel.
Wow.
And he is the head of Giga Fund, which also gave Musk the founding capital through Founders Fund for SpaceX.
Incredible.
And Neuralink.
So they're all kind of tied together, man. There's all kinds of strange links, huh? This whole movie. And then also it's backed by and made by two Spaniards, right? Monteverde, Verastiguy. They have interesting backgrounds. Have you looked into them?
Vestugi, yeah, I'm gonna do another stream on both of them. I haven't really fully got in depth in that part yet, but I think I was gonna do a fourth stream. It would be on them. I know other people have covered them more in depth than I have. I looked more see if I can find Peter Thiel angles, see if I can find United Nations angles, which I have. Tim Ballard spoken directly to the United Nations, William, and the United Nations hired Tim Ballard as a consultant on human trafficking.
Wow. Fascinating. And the weird story about this movie too is that it was finished in 2018 and like bounced around in like post production for years, right? What was
Yes.
that whole story? Do you know any of that background?
Not from what I've seen, only in interviews and people talking about it. I wish I knew more about it offhand. But it seemed that they couldn't necessarily get anybody to properly distribute it or publish it until Angel Studios picked it up.
Gotcha. So they didn't have the money to distribute it. I see.
Yes.
That makes sense.
They were trying to shop it out to various streaming services.
Oh, okay. They've done
My
a good
guess is
job.
they just sat on it until they needed it for some sort of psychological spiritual warfare. You know what I mean?
Maybe this is like the politics. Like the politics of it are like they're against human trafficking, whereas the left just has open borders and crazy like migrant warfare in the streets of New York City. So maybe this is something like, hey, we've got to have a little bit more control.
Or maybe it's to make Trump look like he's for it, or going to stand for it in his reelection campaign. But in reality, what did Trump really do as far as stopping human trafficking or closing down the border when he was president? So,
they weren't very successful. I mean, at least it wasn't just an open air, mob bum rush of the border, which it is now. Like people just say it's total dystopia down there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's definitely increased during the Biden administration. Do not get me wrong. But I don't think Trump was going to be able to do anything. I don't think he's going to be able to do anything if he does get elected in 2024, which I think he will be. They were actually one of the biggest things a lot of people don't realize is that Trump was doing. He set it up and passed it to Biden was through Lucky Palmer and Anduril Industries, which would be Teal. They started putting up a virtual border wall of drones, which still continued into the Biden administration.
Wow. Crazy. Oh, Palmer Lucky, right? That guy who did
Palmer
the
Lucky,
Oculus,
yeah.
Right?
Yep. Anduril Industries, they were working on drones and a virtual border wall in cooperation with Peter Thiel and Palantir. That was approved through the Trump administration. That was continued through the Biden administration. It still hasn't stopped.
All right. And that's another one of Thiel's Lord of the Rings references, right, Andrew?
My guess is yes. My guess is the border wall and the virtual border wall is to keep us in instead of keeping illegal immigrants out. So that's just my belief.
I'm not. There's usually the dual use or triple use, right? So there's probably there's always that good public face while they control you or something like that. Neuralink or whatever. What do you think about the whole move of Twitter to X?
Seems occultic to me. I mean, you tweeted on the head with can't believe I'm trying to click on his name. I mean, Charles Manson and the X on his forehead, right? So it's all occultish transmutation, and we've come full circle with X.com originally being the banking hub that they eventually turned into PayPal, right? That Musk was involved in initially, and Musk has said that he wanted X to be WeChat, the American version of WeChat, to have a social credit score and a financial platform and be a social media hub. I mean, that's how I look at it. How do you look at it, William?
Same way. Absolutely the same way. Like it's alchemically changing everybody. Oh, Twitter, a nice pretty bird. And now, oh, by the way, if you want to stay on here, you got to pay money. And then we're going to put everything on here. And God forbid you ever want to leave or I kick you off of this. Like, I think that there has to be some kind of like exodus out of these big tech things. Like I destroyed my entire connection to Mark Zuckerberg gladly. So I have nothing attached to him in any way, shape, or form.
Has Twitter been worse for you since Musk took over? For me, it seems to be more broken in a lot of ways. You can't search your direct messages anymore for anything, and it just seems to be broken.
They just all were sketchy. It's better than it was before he bought it, in my opinion. Like I'm not getting little censorship notices or like this is forbidden information. So in that regard, it seems to be a pretty good research portal for me. Like if I'm looking into the whole gene therapy shot or really anything else, I seem to be doing okay. But I don't know. I have kind of low expectations on any of these guys anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's probably still employing FBI agents. Who knows? I don't know.
I mean, probably very much so. I mean, we're probably still giving our data anyway. I mean, Musk is still directly working with Ukraine and the Zelensky government as well, too. Let's us forget that still has not changed.
Right.
And I mean, Musk still has Neuralink, which you and I both are directly against.
100%.
It's transhumanist applications. They'll try to sell it as, this will help people, and I understand people with physical handicaps or mental handicaps and in the need of such technology. Like, I understand that I had a very physically handicapped son, but who passed away. But nonetheless, you can't. It's not going to be good putting chips in people's brains because it's going to be more than just the health applications of it.
It's going to
And
be a
so
disaster, a total disaster.
very much so. As you can see, Andrew working directly with the United States military and the military industrial complex right there, and working on drones in the borders and virtual border wall, which you're seeing pictures of it right then and there, and working directly with Palantir. And so anytime I hear the words Peter Thiel, just as much as you are aware of too as well with your research of keeping an eye on Thiel and sending me stuff as well that you come across. If it's with Thiel, it's usually not good. Usually not good news.
It doesn't seem like it. It really doesn't seem like it's good news whenever it's like something pops up, Palantir or something. But yeah, it's interesting times. This movie is really kind of something else because it's almost like this pushback like against the amorality. So they've couched it in these kind of like good versus evil terms.
Yep.
And the book quotes the Bible. Anybody who hurts one of my young ones, it's better for them to have a millstone around their neck. So it kind of has that patina or whatever, but these guys behind it.
Through your occult research, is that kind of like a Masonic duality, which we know is absent through Christian thought, but kind of an occultist thought of dark versus light, kind of white magic versus dark magic kind of motif? Is that kind of similar to your occultist?
It kind of has that feel. And also the other thing about this movie is that all these guys are involved in secret societies.
Yeah.
I mean, Mormonism is kind of like a secret society in a lot of ways. It functions with these secret knowledge, and there's some dark stuff in Mormonism. There really is. I mean,
Jesus and Lucifer are brothers.
Yeah,
Reincarnation beliefs. I mean,
you can become a god.
Yep.
It's like the 19th century Scientology. There's a planet where God lives. We're all God's offspring. And you have power. You wear the holy underwear. You're supposed to be able to do, the same thing that the apostles did. So
the more works you do, the more kids you have, the bigger planet you'll have in space, the bigger family that you have.
Right. Total motivation to like have tons of kids.
And Ron Hubbard ripped off Mormonism.
Possibly. I mean, who knows? The structure is kind of very strange, strangely similar. But Joseph Smith was just incredible what he pulled off. And I think he died. He was 38. Like who comes out like at 15 and goes, I'm starting my own religion, man. This is the way I'm going to do it. And started his own book.
The Mormons went to Utah and later went to war with the United States government, right?
Yeah, they actually had a little bit of a conflict. There was the Mountain Meadows murders where they led directly up to Brigham Young. But like one of the guys took the fall for it. But it was actually kind of a gripe the Mormons had with some other frontier people back in Missouri. And so they dressed up like Indians and killed them all. It was a slaughter. There was that. And then they took themselves out of the United States government, and the government was put the screws down, and they just relented and got rid of polygamy and then eventual statehood. Yeah. But
now the government loves Mormons to be in positions of power, whether it's the FBI or the CIA or the National Homeland Department of Homeland and National Security.
Yeah.
Like Ballard, supposedly he was a CIA intern, allegedly, but trying to investigate that's kind of murky. If he had any involvement within the CIA early on at all, like he claims, and then what was his involvement really in the Department of Homeland Security? Was he really rescuing kids and stopping human trafficking? It's like,
did he leave the CIA? Like, I mean, some of these guys are supposedly ex. That's what they say, but I don't believe a lot of that stuff. Like ex FBI, ex whatever, ex Intel, baloney. That's the one of the scary thing is these Intel connections really kind of never go away. And you're right, they do recruit deliberately from LDS for a lot of reasons. Reliable, don't drink, don't generally cheat on their wives, pretty honorable, trustworthy, and oftentimes speak more than 2 languages, so because they've gone on missions to Malawi or so, so they're already prepped and ready and understand how to learn a language. So
did you come across anything with Operation Underground Railroad or Tim Ballard or anything?
Not much. I mean, I kind of had a couple articles and things like that, but I think there's a lot more to the story. I mean, Ballard is definitely kind of a mysterious figure, but the supporter stuff is really interesting. Like who financed all this stuff is really something else. But I mean, it is like people are mentioning and referencing this movie, The Sound of Freedom, which is supposedly the sound that kids make when they're kind of brought out of being trafficked or sex slavery or whatever. But it's all on the kind of conservative right media, it seems like. I don't know.
Yeah, being platform. What about who Tim is it? I always get confused between the actor and the actual New Age guru. Not Tim Robbins. I just want to make Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins was a big financier of Operation Underground Railroad and has been friends with Tim Ballard for many, many, many years. And one of the major financiers of the Sound of Freedom movie was Tony Robbins.
Didn't know that.
And Tony Robbins, of course, New Age guru that was very much power of positive thinking and thought. There was very much platformed by Oprah Winfrey, who Oprah Winfrey, promoted and pushed very heavily, John of God, and so, I mean, but yeah, definitely the Tony Robbins connection, has
he is a front. Do you know that he's kind of a front? He's really just an actor. He didn't come up with any of the stuff that he promotes. There's a guy out of Santa Cruz who studied NLP and all this stuff. He said, I need somebody to promote it. And he was the guy. He was the kind of correct, charismatic front guy who was, he took liberties with his, fans is one way to put it. That was a good cover up. That was almost as good as the Bezos cover up of the of his picture. That was a great one. Like that was one that was around the circle of the media for about 24 hours and then
gone.
Just totally mind warped right out, or memory hold right out.
Huge PR campaign just taking them down just immediately.
Oh, incredible. Like that's the kind of juice that he got. The best guys. He got that one guy, oh God, I can't remember his name, but he had the best lawyers and stuff. Like, he had that lawyer out of LA. I can't remember his name, but he assembled like the most like hardball attorneys and fixers and crisis management people, and that all went away, man. I bet he spent a good 10, 20, $30 billion, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, and I guess one last thing in closing, another connection and promotion that I saw that that Tim Ballard was a part of. I'd have to get the name of it, but he was on the board of directors for this Afghanistan group with Henry Kissinger. Robbie Martin brought it to my attention. It's like the Afghanistan World Mission or organization. It's the very beginning of my video. The first video I did on the externalization of the hierarchy and the Sound of Freedom. Was on the very first video with that. But
Afghanistan World Foundation, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Why would you work directly with Henry, like be involved with Henry Kissinger? It's like when you bring it up and you look at like all the people that are involved and everything, it's like, why would you associate yourself? Especially if you're talking about the deep state, right? Like the deep state makes up like all the people involved with the Afghanistan World Foundation. Like it's like deep state to the hilt.
No, you're right. It's incredible.
There's Kissinger right there.
There he is.
Dianne Feinstein.
Yeah, there's a parasite. She's terrible.
And then there's like Tim Ballard right there. And then you have the actors, obviously Susan Sarandon, Kiefer Sutherland, Anne Heche,
Roma Downey,
who's a major new ager who LARPs as a Christian as well too. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Al Pacino, Charlize Theron, Shaquille O'Neal, Tom Cruise, Scientology. Talking about Scientology.
Yeah, these guys all probably got a little bit of some few shekels to support that thing. They probably don't do anything about it. John, where can people find your stuff? I
Yes,
gotta run
man.
off to another one.
You guys can find me. We've read the documents on Twitter. We've read the documents on Substack. We've read the documents on Odyssey. That's where I'm at lately. And definitely thank you for having me back on William Ramsey Investigates.
Anytime,
It's a
my
pleasure
pleasure.
as
My
always,
pleasure.
brother.
And guys, check this out. Check out John Brisson's live stream, Sound of Freedom, the externalization of the hierarchy. How many parts did you do of that?
3.5. I've done 3.5.
And you can do that on Odyssey. And I think
Yeah.
it's around YouTube. I know your channel got taken.
At least
down.
about 5 hours or 6 hours of exposing
wow.
it and covering it. So
Wow, amazing. Amazing work. John, thanks so much for your
thank
time.
you, William. God bless everybody.
All right, cheers.